Join us now from Geneva, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Joe, good to be with you.
Good. Checking on the delay, not too bad. We know that some of the details of what happened, Mr. Secretary, but can you recount to us some of the color, how it came together? You mentioned that the venue and the equanimity. Was it cordial and conciliatory right from the outset, or would you characterize it as tough negotiating most of the way?
Joe, I would characterize it very much as President Trump, the equivalent of President Trump's relationship with Party Chairman Xi. They have a good relationship, but they both advocate strongly for their respective countries, for their respective citizens. So it was always respectful. We have the two largest economies in the world. We were firm, and we moved forward. We tried to identify shared interest. We came with a list of problems that we were trying to solve, and I think we did a good job on that. And again, this is a 90-day pause. For our tariff program, we had a plan, we had a process, and now what we have with the Chinese is a mechanism to avoid an upward tariff pressure like we did last time. So this is a 90-day pause.
Do you expect that tone to continue as these details, the devil's always in the details, get worked out over the next 90 days? And what aspects do you think will be relatively easy, and what will present the biggest obstacles?
Well, look, Joe, I don't think anything's going to be easy because this has been going on a long time. But what I can tell you, President Trump in his first term realized a very effective trade deal that was signed in the Oval Office in January 2020. And the Chinese delegation basically messaged to us that the Biden administration failed to hold them accountable for it. So I think that the January 2020, President Trump's highly successful previous trade deal can be a starting point. And knowing that President Trump will enforce any deal, I think will make the Chinese very deliberate in their negotiations and know that whatever they agree to, President Trump will enforce.
Would you say that the Chinese, were you able to detect, or was it apparent that there was some urgency to make some progress, given what we're hearing about Chinese businesses being shuttered en masse, factory activity declining, PMI declining, maybe even some social unrest? Could you detect that, or was there, for lack of a better term, a stiff upper lip shown to you?
Look, the vice premier is a very skilled negotiator. He is a high-ranking Chinese official. I had a very good economic briefing beforehand, but there was no sense of anxiety. There was a sense of moving forward. There was a sense of mutual respect. There was a sense that we had shared interests. But I have seen what's going on in the Chinese economy. We can see what's going on with the shipments to the U.S. And again, we are the deficit country. Historically, the deficit country has a better negotiating position.
Mr. Secretary, part of China's plan over the last several years has been to manufacture far more goods than it can ever consume. It exports that not only to the United States, but to other countries around the world. Other countries like the United States and countries in Europe have felt like they're getting dumped on with all of these excess goods that are being manufactured. Will your talks in other countries find ways to make sure that China can't get around anything you set up in your deals with China by, let's say, shipping goods to Mexico and having that come up, those goods come up through Mexico? How do you shut that down? And did that come up this weekend?
Well, Becky, that's already happening. That's already happening with many goods. It's happening with autos. It's happening with electronics. So that's part of the negotiation with the Mexican government. It's part of our overall strategy. And Chinese have an economic plan called dual circulation. And with dual circulation, our goal is to make sure dual circulation means export and domestic use. Dual circulation cannot mean that China overproduces and that only Chinese goods are consumed in China and then they export the excess to the rest of the world. So we have had the equivalent, because of these high tariff rates, of an embargo on China, and those goods are going to leak to the rest of the world. So, our negotiations, we don't need to tell other countries what they need to do. They are seeing this wave of Chinese goods coming to their shore. They have to find a home, and that could be at a discount price, undercutting local producers.
Mr. Secretary, I have a question for you, which is the market's obviously very happy about this morning. I think the global economy is quite happy about what you've been able to accomplish over the weekend. The question I would ask is how what you've accomplished over the weekend squares to some extent with some of the things that we've heard over the past couple of months from the administration about what the tariffs ultimately could do to both box out China, put pressure on them to do other things for us, to create meaningful additional revenues in the form of tariffs, and perhaps most importantly, to force manufacturing back to the United States. And so by lowering these tariff rates, to some degree, I'm sure there are critics who would say that it upends some of those goals.
Well, again, Andrew, this is just a pause. The April 2nd tariff level for China was 34%. So we have moved that down from 34 to 10. We still have the 20% fentanyl tariffs that were put on in February. So we just in 2025, we have added 30%. And again, one of the most important things that we're doing, we do not want a generalized decoupling from China, but what we do want is a decoupling for strategic necessities, which we were unable to obtain during COVID, and we realized that efficient supply chains were not resilient supply chains. So we are going to create our own steel, protect our steel industry, the work on critical medicines, on semiconductors. So we are doing that, and the reciprocal tariffs have nothing to do with the specific industry tariffs.
We heard, Mr. Secretary, that some progress was made on fentanyl in that deal, and that's 20% of the tariff that's going to stay. What progress was made, and how do you see that happening over the next 90 days? And do you expect a deal can be reached? And what does it look like? What do you want China to do exactly with fentanyl?
Well, Joe, this is a priority for President Trump and indeed the whole administration. I have a personal stake in this. The two very close friends lost children to this terrible scourge. Hundreds of thousands of Americans die every year. And I think that we saw here in Geneva that the Chinese are now serious about assisting the U.S. in stopping the flow of precursor drugs, because the Chinese brought their trade delegation, led by the vice premier, but they also brought a deputy minister for security who was their fentanyl expert. We brought someone from our national security staff, and they had a very long and in-depth sidebar about how our two countries could work together.
As far as some of the non-tariff related barriers that you talk about making progress on, we just had one of our reporters, Eunice, from Beijing, just sort of talking about how the Chinese view things. They said, yeah, we might talk a good, I'm paraphrasing, we might talk a good game and promise some things, but it's very hard to quantify or to put into writing some of those other issues, whether it's rare metals, even currency manipulation. How would that be? affected over the next 90 days? What type of agreement could you reach that has actual teeth for the non-tariff barriers?
Well, Joe, these aren't problems that have sprung up overnight. They sprung up over 40 years. So Ambassador Jameson Greer, USTR, has a book this thick of all the non-tariff barriers and then also of the state subsidies for labor and for industry. So we've got a playbook. President Trump successfully executed a deal in his first term. I think we can build on that. And that's the purpose of the 90-day pause, to see what we can do and work on these non-tariff barriers. Because China actually has low tariffs. It's the insidious non-tariff trade barriers that hurt American companies trying to do business there. And make no mistake, one of the goals here is to open China for American businesses in a fair way. We want American businesses to be able to sell into China, and part of the goal is bringing down these unfair non-tariff trade barriers, and that's what we will be focusing on.
Mr. Secretary, this is a 90-day pause. What comes next? Do you have plans to meet with your counterparts again?
Becky, as I said, the good thing is we had a plan, we have a process, now we have a meeting mechanism. We loosely christened it the Geneva mechanism, so I don't know where we'll meet again. A very agreeable meeting here. We got a lot done over 2 days, so I would imagine that in the next few weeks we will be meeting again to get rolling on a more fulsome agreement.
Mr. Secretary, we're the import country. Obviously, as you pointed out, China's the export country. And I believe some of what we're hearing about maybe some of the stress, the economic stress we're seeing in China. But we have had worries and concerns about this economic stress in this country. Is it still coming? In other words, have we just not seen it yet in terms of job losses or consumer confidence? Do you expect the next employment report to show any slowing? Is it not going to happen here, or we just haven't seen it yet, in your view?
Well, Joe, I don't see any reason that should happen because, look, I think with the tariffs, it's all a matter of calibration. That there were 20%, approximately 20% tariffs from President Trump's first term. Biden left those on. He liked the income from them. So we're still getting that. And that was done in 2 steps, roughly 10 and 10. And the market and the economy has had several years to adjust to that. The 20% fentanyl tariffs went on in February. So if we were going to see any kind of an economic downside from that, it would already be apparent, I would think, and the economic data has surprised on the upside. And now that we have brought these very high tariffs down to 10%, I think the markets, business people live in the future. So I think we can go through at that 10% baseline, which is very easy to calibrate with.
Very good, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate your time this morning. We know you got to run, obviously, and thank you very much. Appreciate it. Safe travels.
Good to see you, Joe.